Hello, everyone. This is Sam Couch with Geoscape Photography on the Heart of Adventure podcast. And joining me today is photographer Eric Matt. Eric is currently joining me from Montana, and I am extremely excited to hear all about Eric's definition of adventures and all of the fun stories that he has to share with you. So, Eric, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Sam. Thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely. I'm stoked that we were able to find the time, especially during the busy summer months, I'm sure. So this is great. So, Eric, why don't you go ahead and just sort of introduce yourself, maybe give a brief background about your photography lifestyle, and maybe sort of what goes on in your everyday life as an adventure photographer.
Sure, yeah. My name's Eric Matt. I live in Missoula, Montana right now, and I guess a little bit of backstory behind photography. It's kind of a broad field, but I'm sure we'll get more in depth as the talk goes on. But basically, I've been doing it for the past maybe 3 years, 3.5 years is when I picked up a camera. That's so I mean, time's kind of flown since then. Since the probably the past 11 months now, maybe 10 months, I've been full-time freelance, which has been a nice change from having to have a job to subsidize that lifestyle. But yeah, as I guess a little bit that goes on in the daily life is it's not always super exciting. Basically, wake up and send a bunch of emails in the morning, just try to get that out of the way. And honestly, it's not super exciting by any means. The exciting part is just when you go on the adventures. And I think the best part of that lifestyle is how many people you get to meet. And I mean, all my friends right now, most of my friends are people I've met through, Instagram and different photography platforms, and just people who share a common interest. And I think hanging out with people that share a common interest makes really anything you do just so much better. So yeah, I mean, the past couple of weeks I've been getting up early, going to Glacier, staying near Glacier, doing a bunch of backpacking, everything. Pretty much doing what most outdoor people do, but I just bring a camera with me. I think that's like the only difference. I think as far as work goes for photography, it's kind of doing the same kind of thing. So I do commercial photography as my full-time job now. And so basically it's 1 or 2 projects a month, and they either send you gear or you go to a certain place with a crew essentially, and then you shoot their products on essentially the same thing that we already do, which is going out and hiking and everything. So it's a nice little lifestyle, and I'm very, very thankful to have found it, and I'm continuing on with it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I love, a common theme that I've noticed because I've interviewed other photographers, I've interviewed people that are maybe weekend warriors in terms of they go out and adventure on the weekends, as in it's not a full time gig. And one of the most common themes that I see during all of these interviews are the people are so important. The people that you get to meet through adventuring and exploration just seems to really solidify the fun aspect of this lifestyle. So it's really cool to hear from all these different kinds of people. And yet the answer that always seems to come up in terms of their daily adventures or their weekend adventures are, yeah, we just get to spend time with the people that we love. And we get to know
Right.
more and more people that are going to be a part of this group. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, and I'm sure you've heard from other people, it is certainly the best part of it. And not just photographers they meet, but you'll meet, other people that I don't know, like in some of my jobs that I've had, I've met some of the most unique characters I've ever met. Just doing all these cool things. Like you'll meet people who are horseback riders, who are motorcycle riders, who are, insane mountain bikers, people who like are pilots and all this kind of cool stuff. And just people who you wouldn't have the opportunity to meet just in, I guess, in a different career field. This kind of gives you a selection of different types of people across the world to meet and chat with and gain perspectives from.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And I think that's exactly what people strive for when they start an adventure lifestyle, whether it be as a full-time career or as something that they do for fun when they have a little bit of break from their typical 9 to 5. So
Right.
how did you get started with all of this? Maybe give a brief background of what got you into photography and where you got your start.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess it happened my second year of college, which was 2016. So basically, it was December of 2016. I decided to go on this road trip by myself. I was just kind of tired of winter, so I wanted to get down to the desert. And so I had this GoPro 2 that my parents had bought me for like, I don't know, in like 2013 or 14, something like that, for Christmas. And I was really excited to bring it with me. And so I went down to Monument Valley. I'm not sure if you know where that is. It's insane down there. It's right on the Utah-Arizona border. A childhood dream of mine to see that place because I'd seen this movie called Wild America when I was little,
Yep.
and I was obsessed with it. It was like my spirit movie, I guess. And I always wanted to see that desert where they go in that movie. So I drove down there, spent about 9 days just driving around different national parks and taking my GoPro with me or whatever, and just loved the idea of just pretty much like ultimate freedom, just being on the road whenever I wanted and kind of playing it by my own rules. And obviously I had to go back to college and everything once I got back. Once I got back, it just, I don't know, it's the traveler's bug. I've heard of it, where you basically just get hooked on it right away.
Oh yeah.
And it sounds cliche, but it's totally what happened. And I started talking to my roommate, and we were talking about how we could do this like sustainably, just travel and just not, worry about the 9 to 5 kind of thing, or just like going to college or doing that stuff that we didn't really have our hearts in. Basically, he came up with the idea to become, professional travel YouTubers, because we saw this guy named Sam Colder. And I think he was a big inspiration for everybody at the time, because his work was really good and still really good. And so we kind of just decided to go all in. We bought a camera and a drone, and literally 2 days later, we booked tickets to Hawaii just to go just throw ourselves into the mix. So yeah, we went to Hawaii with a bunch of friends, hung out, took a bunch of little videos or whatever. And a couple weeks in, he decided it wasn't quite for him. So he moved on to a different kind of career field, and he's actually killing it now in real estate.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so he's doing really good. But I decided to stick with it and kind of branched away from the videography kind of things and went more towards the photo side of things. And now I'm slowly starting to get back in the video side of things again. So it's good though. It's been a long process of just trying to find different inspirations and slowly trying to find your style. And I don't know, I could speak probably forever on my own experiences from it, but
yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think too, it really sounds like it's come full circle, which I think is great. You started off thinking, oh, okay, professional travel YouTubers, where it starts off as, the videography side of things. And then you decided, oh, maybe the photography side, the still shots are a little bit more my niche. And now videography is coming back in. I was actually looking at your portfolio on your website right before this podcast interview, and I was thinking, wow, I mean, look at all of the not only crazy photographs that Eric has taken over time, but look at all of the super cool, even if they're 15-second videos. And just to see all of these adventures, it is really cool to kind of hear that videos are kind of the way that you got hooked. And you took a break from them for a while, but now they're starting to make their comeback. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's funny. And now that you mention it, when I was younger, I guess in middle school even, so basically like in our swim team days, I was really into the idea of being a film director as my main career. And I really loved like the idea of creating like a cinematic style shot. And I really loved like Roland Emmerich films and like, like composing music to go with these kind of films, and how this kind of stuff, like how color and everything kind of played a part in it and everything. And so photography in those days, like, never even caught my attention, because to me, all I'd ever seen from photography was really old, like pictures of just like photos in magazines or whatever, like generic kind of style photos of just like, I don't know, I was never exposed to a lot of really impressive photography when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So it never really caught my attention. And then when I created an Instagram in 2016, late 2016, I started seeing photos that literally looked like movies. And that was what caught me, because I was very impressed with the idea of being able to create this cinematic scene in just a single still image. And so that kind of tapped into my younger ideals of wanting to become a film director, but I could do it at a much more like easy pace that would allow me to get into it at a different rate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely too. And I like that you bring up the point of having the images capture your attention, because that leads me into my next question is, when you're going out on these photo shoots and on your adventures, regardless of the time frame that you have in a certain spot, how do you prepare? Is there something that you think of that, I mean, earlier you were talking about the colors of an image. Is there something that you
Mm.
constantly have on your mind when you're traveling to those destinations, prior to the destination, or while you're actually at the spot where you're taking photographs? Is there something that's constantly going through your mind that tells you, okay, this is what I want to get out of this shoot? Or do you just kind
Sure.
of let it come at you all at once?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. Generally, right now, just because I'm trying to stay local and everything with coronavirus and everything, it's kind of I get an idea for where we're going, but mostly I find it best to just kind of capture the moment when you're there, find the way to best capture that. And it used to be, I always wanted to set up this shot where like I really was into scale photos, where like you have a little human in the huge landscape.
Yep.
But in my opinion, those are cool to throw in there, and I'll definitely still keep taking them when they're like available. But for me, I'm trying to capture more about the detail shots now, and really try to make people who aren't along on those adventures feel like they're there, even if they're just like a shot of like some boots in the mud or something, like just something that details that just correlate with everything and just bring everything together, if that makes sense. So when I go out on an adventure, like let's say I'm going to go do Mount Oberlin in Glacier for sunrise, basically that's the main goal, to have an adventure, right, with a bunch of friends, but then you tell the story along the way with a bunch of different little snapshots of the details that you kind of notice along the way.
Absolutely. I think that that is a really unique and cool answer. So a lot of it is, you think about this spot and you think about sort of the general idea, but then the snapshots along the way are sometimes what are the most important to you.
For sure. I mean, ultimately, when I started photography, like, yeah, I wanted to get into video side of things and everything, but to do a more cinematic side, but it's always a way to just kind of remember your own life in a way. And so remember your own adventures. And I'll look back through my own portfolio and my own even social media and just remember the days that kind of came with each image. And I guess it gives us a way to capture those memories in a way that we think like it should be shared, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is super cool. And I think that's the fun part about photography too, is it is a way to share those memories, not only with yourself and revisiting those memories, but you get to share those memories with others. And I think that that is one of the biggest draws that draws people into the art of photography.
100%.
That's awesome. So you talk about Glacier National Park a lot, and looking at your website, scrolling through your Instagram feed, Glacier National Park seems to have a very special place in your heart. And I know, for people that don't know, Eric, from what I've seen and heard, you did spend some time working at Glacier National Park,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'm sure that that really helped draw that portion into your heart. But if you want to even just go into a little bit of detail about what Glacier means to you and why it is one of your top destinations, because I have seen some absolutely incredible photos come out of Glacier National Park from you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, I guess I went there all the time when I was little and never really like appreciated it, if that makes sense. I mean, it was something that when you're taken to somewhere as someone really little, you never really appreciate the landscapes you're in.
Hmm.
And then I realized growing up that Glacier is one of the few places on earth where you can literally go to, 10 different types of ecosystems in like a matter of like a million square miles. Each one has their own specialties. And yeah, I mean, they're just places that most people never get to experience in their life. And so there's like a huge draw for me to just go back there and like experience that, I guess. And I don't know, you've been to Glacier plenty of times, right, Sam?
Oh yeah, I love Glacier. Cannot wait for the day that I can get back there.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And the best thing about Glacier is Yeah, it's super populated in the summertime, right? You'll get like bumper to bumper traffic going up the Sun Road,
Hmm.
but most of the people don't ever take the time to get out of their cars and go to the places that the main lump sum of tourists don't go to.
I
And
agree.
so there's so many like secret trails and different stuff, like secret lakes in the back that most people just don't take the time to get to,
Hmm.
especially during sunrise and sunset. And
Absolutely.
so when those times come around, you basically, like, if you go with a group of friends, you have the entire park to yourself. And that is one of the coolest things, just like having Glacier Park be like your playground, just to hike around it and have it be your own place. And it becomes much more special and much more unique when that's the case, because you're the only ones out of like 7 billion people to see that site, you know?
Right. Yeah. You're one of the only people that get to see that site at that specific moment. And I think that's
Right.
such a good point, too, because I'm currently living in Idaho. And, it's so funny because a lot of people either think of Idaho as I'm living in Boise and they think of it as, okay, it's just high desert. It's ugly. There's not a lot around. Well, that's simply not how it is. I have seen some of the most beautiful sunsets in Boise, Idaho.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
places like the Sawtooths are, a
Oh,
hop,
Sawtooth
skip, and
Lake.
a
Yeah.
jump away. And
Right.
like Glacier, they're super packed in the summer. And so what my fiance and I have done is we have decided, okay, we're not going to, especially because of COVID right now, we are not going to hike on the most popular scenic hikes where everyone else is going to be. So we have done
Right.
sort of these off the beaten path trails where, I kid you not, the last weekend we went out, we were the only two people that camped at the trailhead the night before. And then only two people that were on that trail the entire time. The only other person that would have been on trail was the person that was staffed in the fire lookout. And it
Okay.
was so cool to experience this trail by ourselves because we were able to see parts of the Sawtooths from an angle that not a lot of people get to see. And it was so cool to be able to wake up before the sun rose and start this trail and just get to encounter everything that nature has in one of the purest way possible.
100%, dude. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't resonate more with what you just said. Like, that's very well said.
Thank you. Yeah. And so thinking back to Glacier and all of these beautiful spots where the tourists do get to see, but you also mentioned that you guys go to a lot of spots that the tourists don't experience because it's not simply, oh, pull over to pull out, get out of their car, or even simply just rolling down the window. In these spots, is there something that draws you towards these spots? Because a lot of Glacier you can see from the road, but then there's a lot of things where you're hiking back and you might see a summit from another angle, or you might see a lake that is a 10-mile hike just to get to the lake. Is there something
Right.
that draws you towards these quote unquote remote locations?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just the concept of exploration. I think it's just rooted in us, and I mean, maybe just a small group of people find that interesting because there's really only a group of people that actually do that kind of thing. So I don't really know why most people don't try to get off the beaten path more and try to explore more. I think it's more they're just not. I don't know. It's kind of a hard thing to put words to, I guess. But yeah, as far as personally, I just love exactly just seeing the things that most people don't get the chance to see. And I mean, most people already don't get the chance to see Glacier. So it's even more special to like be one of the few that get to see this lake that's 10 miles back, or this overlook that's, way up here for sunset. And I mean, even doing things, I mean, the best part is doing things for sunrise and sunset, like I just said. And so sometimes my friends and I will hike, up a mountain summit that most people, like only a few people do during the daytime,
Hmm.
but we'll go up there for sunrise, so we start the hike at like 1 a.m. and then go all the way up to the top and see it at a time that literally maybe a handful of people see it per year for sunrise, and
Yeah.
I think that's the most special thing, because at that point, like the world, like just feels like your oyster. It just like, you feel like you feel special in those moments.
Right. And you feel you almost feel at one with nature. And
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And I think that, you bring up the term exploration and how it's because it's crazy to me too how there's not more and more people going off the beaten path. Now, in some ways, that's probably a good thing that there are
100%.
certain parts of the world that stay untouched. But in a lot of terms, because of technology, technology is great. I mean, look at the camera equipment that we have now and the
Right.
capabilities that it provides us with. But at the same time, with technology comes some downsides. And those downsides could be, oh, maybe I can just see Glacier National Park via Google Earth, or you can look at videos that people post on YouTube. And that's great because it
Oh,
provides
for
someone
sure.
with a source, especially if they're 1,000 miles away from Glacier National Park. Not everybody can wake up one morning and say, I'm just going to take a trip 1,000 miles away from where I'm currently living. But
Sure.
at the same time, I think that because of the technology, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this too, is humans as a whole have lost a lot of their connection with the exploration side. And if you really think back to human history, exploration is something that is in our DNA. It is something that humans have been doing forever. And I feel like we have really lost touch with that side of our human nature, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. So yeah, obviously technology can really help us, but it also hurts us in a way. But I think the part where it hurts us almost helps the people who actually care more about the exploration. Because
Mhm.
like if you think about like in the past couple of years, we've seen really big photographers, right? And this was kind of before geotagging was known as a kind of a bad thing,
Mhm.
where you geotag specific locations and then like thousands of people kind of bottleneck into these locations that just can't handle the amount of people that are being shoved at it, right?
Mhm. Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, for those locations, that's really bad. But, I mean, right now, for example, like the Dolomites, there's this one view on top of the Dolomites where everybody stands on this little peak or
Yep.
whatever, and there's the Dolomites in the background. Everybody's seen the photo, hundreds of people take it.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I mean, obviously that's a really cool location. And so I feel like if I were to just go to that location, I would feel like I've already been to it just because of how much I've seen it, which
Mhm.
kind of sucks. I mean, I guess there's this instance where in Canada, we were kind of on this road trip to Alaska last year, and we stopped at this waterfall that we had seen 100,000 times. In British Columbia, there's like this suspension bridge going across this canyon,
Oh yes, I know
and
actually I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, the waterfall's like off to the left and
Yep.
everything. And I'd seen it 100 times, whatever. We just decided to stop there, and it's a beautiful place. I can't knock it at all, but I literally felt like I'd already been there so much, and
Yeah.
it didn't seem exciting. And I was like, what, like, am I taking this place for granted because I've seen it so much? Like, is that one of the downfalls of what we're exposed to 24/7 on Instagram, just seeing all these places? And
Right.
so I think that just for that concept is one of the reasons why I just love the places that haven't been shown so much. And that's why I will never, ever like say the location of like, well, at least publicly say the location of, some of the cool sites that I've been to, like just because I don't want those to get blown up and I want those to always be appreciated the way they should, where it just like you go in, no expectations, and it just takes your breath away.
Absolutely. And I think it's important too that you brought up the geotagging because I've noticed a lot of photographers, and I've started to do it more myself, is rather than geotagging, oh, we're at this specific beach, for example, we
Hmm.
we tag, oh, we're on the Washington coast, because there's a lot of
Right.
Washington coast. And
Exactly.
that's very important. And I know I was in Iceland for a touch over a month last year, and it was so amazing to me because I felt the same way that you felt with that waterfall. Some of the
Yeah.
most tourist driven spots in Iceland were still absolutely beautiful. And I was so excited to go there. But the spots that I remember the most are the spots that I went to while I was field mapping for geology, because you had to go way out in the middle of nowhere,
Sure.
or the places when I was, just driving around taking pictures, the places that really no one goes to, or the amount of pictures that you see online or on social media presence were very minimal. Those have a much bigger spot in my heart than those main tourist spots. So I really like that
Yeah.
you brought up that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally relate to that. I mean, I went to Alaska twice, I guess, within the last year and a half. And so the first time we went, we kind of hit some of the more well-known spots. That was kind of like the people we were traveling with. Plus it was like all by the road, we didn't really trek in very much. So, I mean, it's beautiful and everything. Like Alaska's gorgeous, and it still took my breath away from all the spots that I wasn't expecting to see. But I recently went there on an apparel shoot. I guess not recently, early 2020, kind of before COVID hit. I was there for a week, just over a week, doing an apparel shoot. And basically we rented a helicopter service, and they took us way back into the glaciers. And they told me, they're like, all right, like this is like your playground right now. Like, tell us where you want to land, and we'll land there. And I'm just now about like to start posting those photos from that or whatever. But these were things that I'm confident that nobody has ever seen,
right?
Except for the helicopter pilots, because like we went back way to this ridge that was so far back, and it kind of overlooked the crux of two massive glaciers that just poured over the mountain like waterfalls. And there's no roads or any way you can get back there except for a helicopter. And so when we parked there and got out, I was like, this is the most beautiful sight I've ever seen, and nobody has like had the opportunity to see it. It's a very, very cool feeling to just see those remote things. And I think that's one of the things that just draws me so much to the idea of exploration and photography, is like chasing those things that most people don't get the chance to do, like we circled back to earlier. But yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from as well when you say the most memorable places are the ones that you don't expect to see.
Right. And I think it forces people to do their research more about a location. I think that's the fun part about planning a trip, because yes, it's easy to get on an app. I mean, we have phenomenal apps like All Trails or the Washington Trails Association. Those are great, and they definitely make the outdoors more accessible, but they don't have the off the beaten trails that are, generally speaking, very steep, not necessarily as easy. You have to wake up really early to get the shot that you want. And I think what it does is it does force people to do their research, and it forces people to actually say, okay, I need to learn about this area, perhaps look it up on Google Earth to learn about how the terrain is going to change while I'm there or whatever, and actually put in more than 5 minutes worth of research and a filter that says number one location in the Sawtooths. Because for me, it's more fun in nature to see less people on trail, and it also provides a much better opportunity to get that shot that you want.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's one of those concepts we kind of have to keep on like the down low, because it is so special. And like, I mean, imagine if, some huge travel industry came out with this app or this concept where they just basically told everybody like, hey guys, you're kind of doing it wrong. Like, you're stuffing yourselves into areas where you're not supposed to be. Everybody take time to go through and research where you're going to go, get off the beaten path. Then suddenly those special places would kind of like stop becoming so special again, because more people would start to go to them. So I almost think it's one of those things you just kind of have to just secretly appreciate, Like, obviously it's bad for the places that are getting slammed with tourism that can't handle it. But I mean, ultimately there will always be people going to Yosemite. There's always going to be people going to Yellowstone, always people going to Glacier, and always people, like, for example, on other sides of the world, hiking the Himalaya treks or whatever. But not everybody's going out of their way to see those little villages that are outside the beaten path of the Himalayas,
Absolutely.
And so that's just one of those things. I think like you just gotta, the few people that understand it have to like kind of keep that a secret, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, absolutely. It totally makes sense. And I think that what will help keep that a quote unquote secret from millions and millions of people is the fact that a lot of times these hikes that are overcrowded are the easiest to get to.
For sure.
Exactly. I've been on certain hikes that are off the beaten path where by the time we get to the trailhead, I have to double check my car, and I have a Subaru, so I have, quite a bit of ground clearance and everything, but I always do the double check of, wow, did I hit a big rock or something? Because the roads and the accessibility to get up to these trails are much less cared for than say the trail. I mean, you can, the last time I went to Yosemite was a couple years ago, and don't get me wrong, that is still one of my favorite national parks, but you can pretty much get to Half Dome on a paved course.
Right.
Whereas, you can get to the foot of Half Dome on essentially, there's a little bit that's unpaved, but mostly paved, when, in my opinion, some of the best views of Half Dome are from the backcountry that you have to hike quite a ways to get to.
Yeah. So I haven't done a lot of hiking in Yosemite, so I can't really speak for that, but I can totally understand where you're coming from on it. And
Right.
I kind of had my thoughts about All Trails, that app All Trails. I
Hmm.
was like, is this going to ruin those places? But I really don't think it will, because most people at their hearts are not willing to put in the hard work to go see it. Most people,
Absolutely.
when they go outdoors, they're looking for a nice, easy, relaxing outdoor. They're not just going to be like, all right, time to load the backpacks. Let's go for a 10-day trip in the mountains.
Yeah, that's very true. And I know a lot of times too, people aren't willing, if they do find one of those trails, to post it on something like All Trails, because they
Right.
think the same way, where they say, okay, I don't want this to get overburdened by 100 people in a week if it goes on All Trails and it hits one of the most iconic trails lists or something. They want to keep
Hmm.
it special, and they want to keep it secret. And especially as photographers, one of the things that I strive to do is I want to share the world through my lens. And I think that's a goal of every photographer, is to share their work and creativity. But at the same time, there are certain spots where I say, the only people that I'll really tell are the people that take the time to go out of their way and ask me about this adventure, not just the ones that said, oh, I just need to go take a selfie at the top of this peak.
For sure. Right. Exactly. Because those are the ones that will bottleneck all the spots that are just overpopulated.
Right. And I think that's important, especially it's just so great, because it brings me up to my next question for you. And it's about, our world is constantly changing in many different ways. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now is we are faced with a global pandemic. And
Right.
this has caused so many different things for so many different people. And a lot of people, especially this summer, from what I've seen in Idaho and from what I've seen on social media platforms in general, people have more time because they're either working remotely or they don't have a job currently. And with more time, more people want to travel. And I think that this is where those places that get bogged down. I remember seeing stuff on the news when they had the national parks closed. It was crazy because people and cameras were catching bears hanging out in places that they hadn't been to in decades because there were people.
Right.
But now that there's people coming back and in higher and higher populations than ever, I think that, from what I've heard, I was interviewing a couple of other people from Washington, and they were saying that in lakes that used to not be the most popular hikes are now some of the most popular hikes, and they're finding litter like sofas in lakes. And that just
Oh
blows my
man.
mind. And it's just, with people that have more time, they essentially can find ways to harm Earth, and that breaks my heart.
Dude, absolutely. Yeah, that breaks my heart to hear that too. I mean, I haven't really seen that here in Montana for the most part. I mean, yeah, like places like like the Mission Mountains and stuff like that. Like, luckily those have been closed off,
Hmm.
so they haven't been like slammed as well. But I guess when Glacier reopened, it initially had this huge boost of people, and then it got known for having this huge boost of people, so nobody went,
Right.
and then it
Okay.
all
Yeah.
just kind of fizzled out. Yeah, and
True.
so I don't know. Like, I guess what is your question for me that you're kind of wanting me to answer about
Yeah.
that topic?
Absolutely. My big question with that is, how has this impacted your life as a commercial adventure photographer, in terms of, do you really have to go really, really remote now to get these awesome photos or awesome coverages with certain brands, just because of the higher number of people? You were saying that it's not really impacting Montana, and I know you're not doing a lot of traveling, but have you noticed any spike anywhere that you've gone recently?
I went to the Sawtooth for a little while, about
Hmm.
a month and a half ago,
Hmm.
and that was pretty crowded. We went to some different spots that weren't nearly as crowded, which was really nice. But like, we drove by Redfish Lake, and I'm not sure how populated it usually is, but
Yeah.
it was like a Florida beach, man. It was so full of people. I was like, good God.
Yep.
So yeah, we just obviously kept driving. I don't think we got out. but yeah, I mean, it's all about just finding those spots that most people don't really see that much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, as someone that adventures myself, don't get me wrong, I want the outdoors to be accessible for people.
Oh, for
But
sure.
on the same token, the more accessible the outdoors is, the more of a requirement that we need to keep the outdoors healthy, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense. I mean, we
Yeah.
can't be throwing sofas into lakes. We can't be overcrowding beaches. We can't be overfishing certain spots because that will ruin an ecosystem. And then all of a
Oh,
sudden,
100%.
these people don't have a way to get to that outdoor spot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it just comes to, spreading that message of, pack in, pack out. Like, littering has to be a universally frowned upon thing. There can't be people that like just think it's okay, I mean,
Hmm.
and the problem with those kind of people, I guarantee already, you're not going to get messages through to them. It has to
Yeah,
be something that if someone sees it, they have to speak out against it. Or the people who are good about it, if they see any litter on the trail, pick it up. Bring a
absolutely.
plastic bag with you or a paper bag or something with you that you can like pick up trash, And I think for a while there's this movement called the adventure bag, where
Hmm.
everybody brings a big garbage bag with them whenever they hike and make sure they come out with any piece of trash that they find,
Absolutely.
along their trail. And I think if everybody kind of had that mindset, if that movement came back, it would be a much better place,
Right.
especially in those places that are well, like litter ridden and everything. Because, to be honest, in Montana, like I have not seen the litter to that extent.
That's good. That is so good that people have been able to keep Montana healthy. But like I said, Yosemite, beautiful, one of the most beautiful spots I've been to. But I see Starbucks containers and
Yeah,
empty plastic bags or lunch stuff just hanging out everywhere. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is not only terrible for the environment, but think about all of the animals that come and visit during the quote unquote off seasons that get themselves into this stuff. That is
right.
when it gets dangerous for both parties.
100%. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it was the same way in Glacier, like I mean, imagine like, when the government has its periodic shutdowns and nobody's in the national parks or whatever, and the dumpsters get overflowed
Hmm.
and all that stuff. It's just, I almost think it's an issue with the amount of convenience that there is too.
Hmm.
And so you kind of get those people that are in it for the convenience. I'm not trying to knock people who just go to enjoy the day. I'm saying like I can only imagine there are people that go to national parks, go to only the convenient routes, and because they're so about convenience, they don't feel like throwing their trash away. You don't
Exactly.
really see that stuff on the backcountry trails because those kind of people aren't in it for convenience and they're more inclined to like put in a little bit of extra work to get their trash out of there.
Absolutely. And I think this is actually a perfect turning point to go into the big questions that I ask everybody, because what we're talking about right now resonates with one of these questions so much. And that question is, for people that are current adventurers or people that want to be adventurers, what would you advocate is one of the most important things to allow the outdoors to be, one, more accessible, but then at the same time keeping the earth that we live in a healthy place? Because that is single-handedly one of the most important things that we can do, whether it be from keeping fresh water fresh, or like we talked about, picking up trash on the trails, et cetera, et cetera. Could you just go into a little bit of detail about how not only us, but the adventure community as a whole could fight this double-edged sword as, okay, we want to get people out into nature more, but at the same time, we don't want to ruin nature for everyone?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I'd start with the idea that, humans, like, think about it from like a global perspective. Like, humans are literally, we're not like, we're not some over looming like deity over nature. Like, nature isn't below us, if that makes sense. We're literally just species that are on the earth that somehow got more sophisticated and are able to like fly around and drive around super fast, right?
Hmm.
We're able to have communications, we're able to have, food from all over the world at our disposal, but that doesn't make us not animals, right?
Right.
At everybody's core, we literally are just like in an area where we initially belonged in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing different about it. And so I think it's important to remember that no matter where you are, you're in that place's, like, that place wasn't built for you.
Right.
You know, you're basically a guest in this, like, you know, ecosystem that you're walking into. And so I think it's important to, you know, for example, like the tourists in Yellowstone trying to like touch the bison.
Mm-hmm.
There's this overwhelming mindset with people who don't do their research on these kind of places that they hear the word park and they think, you know, it's like a nature, like amusement park,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and everything, like nothing's going to hurt them. And that like because they're humans, they, you know, have this overwhelming rule over nature when that's not the case at all.
Well, I like that you bring up sort of the guest mentality of things, because it is, we are guests to nature. Nature was
Right.
not built here for us to trash it. That is absolutely
Exactly.
not the point why we have nature. And if you think about it, when you go into someone else's home, for example, do you just trash the place? Probably
Right.
not, because you would get in a lot of trouble. You have to think of nature as it's not your own home,
Right.
because you're not living there. And if you are, you know, if you're living in a tent or something like that, well, it doesn't mean that that entire park is your playground. What it means is that, okay, I have to not only share my surroundings with other people, but I have to share my surroundings with the current ecosystems that have been living here forever. And that's
Sure.
important, to keep that sort of guest mentality of, I wouldn't want someone coming into my home and trashing it. Therefore, I am not going to go out into nature, which is so many other organisms' home, and trash it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that just kind of has to be the thing you need to, like, people need to promote
Mm-hmm.
is that whole concept of, you know, you're not where, I don't know, people treat it like it's like a shopping mall.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
I
you
know.
go, like, there's so much litter in like mall and store parking lots, whatever, they just don't care. And I think it becomes even more prevalent when, in some instances, when you're outside, because suddenly that's the wild. Like no one's going to even supposedly see that. You know, it's nature. Nature's taken over for it. It's the savage wild or whatever. So people just don't care. And I think
Right.
it's just all about educating, like how, you know, delicate these ecosystems are, make people care. And I think the real question is, how do you make people who are in it for the convenience actually care about something that likely wouldn't even affect them, if that makes sense, if they're to do it, but it affects so much other things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think that is the question that national park staff, preserve staff, that they all have to take into account on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there are people, because maybe there isn't one right answer, because humans are unique. And it's something where you could come up with a design idea that could maybe help promote it, but only 40% of the people that visit that park are going to actually follow and abide by those new rules. Whereas the 60%, like you were talking about, are just going to ignore it because it's still, or it becomes all of a sudden where a convenience is an inconvenience. And I think
Right.
a lot of people don't like that. So I think it's going to, personally, in my opinion, I think it's going to take multiple approaches before we find our
absolutely
one
agree.
right answer. But I think that our wonderful national park staff and other people in those domains are spending a lot of time thinking of that. Because I know I have seen, for a fact, I have seen someone litter, and about 10 seconds later, what they didn't realize, that there was a national park ranger behind them.
Mhm.
And these people were asked to leave the park and pay a massive fine.
Right.
And so for some people, that rigid crackdown is going to be the best thing. For others, that
100%.
might not be the most understanding thing. And so I'm sure that, you know, there's other tactics that are being thought of. And I'm sure it's just going to take time. But what my hope is that, and you've even said it yourself, when you see trash on trail, you pick it up. But people like us, people that are wanting to get into more of an adventuristic lifestyle, you just need to lead by example, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. It needs to be a universally, like, littering, like, you know, leaving a trace needs to be a universally frowned upon thing. And
Hmm.
I think even if you're not a park ranger and you see someone doing it, you need to like walk up and give those people, a lot of crap for what they just did,
Yep.
and, make it just like give them a hard time about it and make sure they, know that this is not something that most people will tolerate.
Absolutely. I think that's very important.
And I mean, then it comes back to the people, what about the people who are suddenly like, nobody's watching and they feel like they could just get away with it. It's like, you got to figure out what drives them to do that, because I feel it. I don't know. That's a really, really tough topic,
It's
because
those
there are
open
people that are
questions. Yeah.
yeah, there are people that are just inherently, bad people, and they'll just like, they know it's bad too. Like that's why
Hmm.
they're doing it in secret. And so they simply just don't care about it. And so
Right.
it's ultimately just trying to figure out why that is and how to approach that different
And you're
uh,
right. It is very
mindset there.
hard. And that's something that hopefully our generation and future generations can figure out. But
Hmm.
we'll see. I mean, only time can tell, right?
Right.
Awesome. So here is the biggest question and sort of the motivation behind this podcast. Because I know, and my listeners hear it all the time when I talk about this. If you look up adventure on Google, one of the first things that comes up are activities like skiing, skydiving, whitewater rafting. And those activities are super fun. Don't get me wrong. But I think what that does a lot of, and we've kind of covered this in multiple ways, is it can frighten people to get outside because they think, oh my gosh, in order to adventure like all these other people on
Hmm.
social media, I need to be really good at skiing or go to these remote locations. And
Sure.
that's one of the things where the adventure culture, as inviting as it is, might not be as inviting as it could be. And so, my question for you is, what is your definition of adventure as a photographer? As someone that goes out there to capture very specific moments in time and share those moments in time with other people. Because from what I've noticed, everybody that I've interviewed has had a different definition besides the classic, oh, skydiving or
Yeah.
something like
Right.
that.
Sure. Yeah. So adventure, I think at its core means uncertainty, like not being entirely in your comfort zone, if that makes sense. So no matter what you do, if something's slightly outside your comfort zone, that's kind of an adventure,
Hmm.
in my own opinion. And so, like, imagine if you had this day set out where, like, let's say you personally were going to go climb this mountain or whatever, or like
Hmm.
see this view, go on this trail or something, but you knew with absolute certainty what you'd find, you knew with absolute certainty what you'd see, and you knew with absolute certainty that you'd be completely okay. Like, no matter what, like, even if it was like a medium, not even really that difficult of a trail, but like, I think what drives people to do it is the uncertainty.
Hmm.
Like, even if it's just a slight uncertainty of what they're going to find, what they're going to see, how it's going to look. And I think it's all about just kind of getting outside your comfort zone in that element. So, like, obviously people don't have to free solo El Cap to have an
Hmm.
adventure.
Right.
It's like, I mean, for him, for Alex Honnold, that's an adventure, because
Hmm.
like he's not entirely certain on how that's going to go. If you knew for absolute certainty that he'd be totally fine, I think it would take away like the enjoyment of that adventure process, if
I
that makes
agree.
sense. So I think it's just, even in a significantly smaller scale, if you go, biking down a moderately difficult trail or like a easy moderate trail, there's still some challenge in there, and it still is something that you feel the joy of overcoming, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. And I love that you brought up the uncertainty and getting out of your comfort zone portion because that can be applied to any aspect in life, regardless of if you're a hiker or a rock climber. And, what I said earlier too is I'm trying to get answers that go against the typical grain of someone being a skier, but I love skiers. I'm a skier myself. I rock climb myself.
Mm,
I do a lot of the action sports that are considered adventuring, and I'm interviewing people that do action sports. But a lot of what it comes down to is exactly what you said. People are not just going out there to ski. they're going out there for other reasons. And it's exactly like you said, where it's you're getting out of your comfort zone. You're experiencing a little bit of uncertainty. The brain draws you towards that. And that is what's so awesome about adventure.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I guess I heard this, I'm not sure if it was a podcast. It might've been like one of those, like, kind of like thoughty videos on YouTube. Like, I think that's the word of it, where you like, it's like thinking, like brain games or whatever. And it was like, would you want to have a life that was going to be perfectly laid out how you hope it will? And like have it be guaranteed to go exactly your way, where you like, let's say you want to like start a company and you make millions of dollars and like nothing is challenging in it. Everything goes your way. And suddenly you literally have everything you could possibly want with no hardships at all. It's like, would you want that? And the answer was overwhelmingly like, no, you wouldn't want that. You'd want some uncertainty. You like, one of the biggest joys in life is when things go your way that you were hoping they would, but weren't entirely certain.
I agree. It's hitting those speed bumps that's so important, because like adventure, if you face uncertainty, you can learn. Essentially, you should learn from every adventure. And as I'm sure every time you go out for a photo shoot, you learn something new, whether it be about photography, about yourself, about the world around you, about the friends or the group that you're traveling with. And I'm sure that excites you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess my main goal is to learn as much as I can about the world through photography, but I also want to, I want to leave a mark on humanity for the better. Like, I guess a little side tangent. My main goal is to make enough with brand work that I can live comfortably, but, make videos or whatever, like work with, nonprofit organizations that can't really afford to have that kind of thing for them.
I love that.
Like as the main thing, like as the main goal. And that way I can sustainably do it and not worry about it, if that makes sense. So
yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. Back to the adventuring thing though. It's like, it is just a way to just harness that uncertainty. And I mean, imagine if you're waking up early to go shoot a sunrise, there's no guarantee it's going to be a beautiful sunrise. You don't even know exactly how it's going to look, but, it's when it does happen and when it is beautiful, that's when you get the feelings like, yes, like this paid off.
Yep. Those are the moments that matter for people. And to learn from those moments when uncertainty wins is very important.
For sure. Exactly. Or like, even when like uncertainty like loses, like where, like you end up getting stuck in the mud or something, like driving up this road, those become memories on their own, even if they're really adverse conditions.
Absolutely. I mean, I know so many people that have funny stories like that, and they might not seem funny in the moment, but when they can look back, they said, wow, I learned a lot from all of that. Or it's a story that I could tell for a very long time because it's still a big memory and a big portion of my life that took place because of the uncertainty.
Right. And so, awesome. I think ultimately to chalk adventure up, it is uncertainty. Like you can have an adventure in a city, by like, walking down the streets and photographing like street people or whatever, and like there's that little bit of like danger that you kind of feel, a little bit of uncertainty that like being in a city, you kind of feel vulnerable and everything, but it is an adventure when you're just walking around like, photographing different elements of city life.
Right. So for you, it sounds like adventure and how adventure could technically become more accessible is it just has to be looked at in the framework of uncertainty and living with that uncertainty and cultivating that uncertainty to make it something of a learning experience or of something that you can reuse as a memory. I love that. That's a really good definition.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm curious on to how that compares with some of the other definitions of adventure that you've heard, like in their own opinions.
Oh yeah. I mean, some of the definitions I've heard from another photographer that I interviewed, he was talking about adventure is just experiencing the new and being with a specific group of people that promote you, that make you challenge yourself and that challenge you to be better. And I think that's awesome. And then from a couple of other people that I've talked to, they've said things along the line of as it's just getting out there. One person described an adventure could literally be walking out your front door and going a little bit further on a path that you traditionally take. And I said, wow.
Absolutely.
Or trying a new restaurant. And I love that because the second season of my podcast is going to be all about food and how that ties into adventure. So I thought that was really cool how people can bring up the standpoint of adventures don't have to be these grand summits. They could literally be walking out your front door to try something new, to go to a new restaurant. So it's really cool to hear all these unique answers.
Absolutely. I think they all kind of tie into each other too. Like even with the uncertainty thing, like when you walk down the path a little bit longer, you know, you're not entirely certain on what you're going to find. And like the uncertainty thing doesn't have to deal directly with danger. Like it could be like, you know, like just not knowing what you're going to find, you know, and that ties into that other thing of like experiencing the new, you know.
Absolutely.
Like as humans, like it just stimulates our brains, you know. If we had things that weren't new all the time, you know, why do people, like, for example, like play video games? You know, in a way, it is a vicarious way of experiencing new things, you know, getting new experiences.
Absolutely. So. And that's one of the things that I've loved about having all these interviews and doing this podcast series is the fact that, from what it sounds like, each person is going to give their very own unique answer because each person that I interview has lived differently than the other people that I'm interviewing. And that's what's important. But it all comes back to this root of uncertainty, the new, something small that is a change. It always comes back to that root. And that's exactly what I was hoping for before I started this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the last question that I have for you then, before we'll wrap this up, is for new adventurers out there, people that hear this podcast series and they think to themselves, wow, this is something that I could do. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to go on a 10-mile hike tomorrow morning, but I could go for a walk in a local park or something. What would be your tip to anyone that is thinking about starting to adventure more in their lifetime?
I think once you're already thinking about starting to adventure more, you're already on the right track. I think when that's the case, I feel like you're going to start taking baby steps in that direction. And I think, you know, reinstating the point that like you can do adventures on a much lower level, and it doesn't have to be jumping out of a plane or climbing a mountain peak, you know, because like the more you start directing yourself in a certain way, you know, obviously there's like a ton of questions regarding that, but like you take one step and you get one answer, if that makes sense, you know.
Absolutely.
So, and the more steps you take towards that direction, the more you're going to find people who are, you know, kind of into that kind of realm of things as well. Like, let's say you have only worked in an office for like the last 25 years of your life, you know, and your ultimate goal is to someday climb a mountaintop, and you don't know how to like bridge that gap. You know, obviously you can't just go straight into climbing a mountaintop.
True.
So I think like what you're saying is reassess your version of what adventure is, like your definition of what adventure is, and slowly take those steps, you know, like go for like a walk in the park, you know, maybe go somewhere that, you know, not a lot of people in your town see, like even in your own state, you know, like take a trail that not a lot of people go to. You know, these will open up opportunities or like get you more invested in the idea of going a little further next time. Like maybe then once you're into it even more, maybe taking like a week off and traveling somewhere you don't normally go.
Right.
You know, ultimately all these things can lead up to the courage and like the understanding of like, all right, I'm ready to climb this peak, you know, 4 years later. And
baby
so that's
steps.
how you, exactly, baby steps. And I think that's the whole thing is people see the result and they don't see any of the baby steps that most people took to get there. You know, most people didn't just start out climbing peaks. Like it was in a similar boat. Like, yeah, they kind of, you know, I know so many people who went from like working, you know, normal jobs to just like becoming hardcore adventurers because they took baby steps, you know?
I agree 100%.
I think it's similar to like with the photography thing, you know, like let's say someone wants to become a professional photographer, but they think they suck right off the bat. And I think one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard about photography is like, don't compare your day 3 to someone's year 5, you know?
Yeah, very true.
Because like you can't do that because they were all in the same place ahead of time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my favorite things I've learned about myself in photography is that I'm much more capable than I initially gave myself credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to change your mindset to suddenly picture yourself as someone who is a future successful person in this like industry, or like picture yourself as someone who will be climbing that peak 4 years from now. Like what would your self today be doing to get to that point?
Right.
If that makes sense. And so
Absolutely.
that's how you connect those dots, I think, in my opinion.
That is such a cool way to think about it too. And I love that you brought up thinking about a future self, or not being, what you brought up, the photography example of not being too overly critical on your day 3 compared to someone's year 5. Because
Right.
I think a lot of people, when they start any career, first, like photographers, for example, that are just trying to get into the game, they'll see these beautiful National Geographic photos and they think, wow, mine is terrible compared to that. But those people
Right.
that are in National Geographic have been doing this for years, and they also had to go through the phase where they were looking at people from National Geographic.
Exactly.
So that is a really cool response. I really appreciate having you on this podcast. It's been really cool to hear your unique answers and just kind of learn about how adventure has played such an important role in your life.
Dude, absolutely. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to hearing your podcast.
Thank you so much. So great talking to you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you again soon.
Yes, likewise, Sam. I will talk to you later.
Another fantastic guest and more storytelling on the definition of adventure. We'll be back on the next episode of the Heart of Adventure podcast. I look forward to you all tuning in again next time. Thanks.